What's up, man? How's it going? So, I will walk you through how I would do an answer to one of these essay questions. The first thing I would recommend is have scratch paper so you can take notes on what you read. Whether you have a pen or a pencil, it's okay. I'm using a pen, but I would probably use a pencil in case I would erase anything. And the last thing I would do is look at the questions. Okay, so I wouldn't even look at the questions or worry about them until I read the essay. And then another thing that I would do on these notes is I would break it down by paragraph. So paragraph 1, paragraph 2, obviously paragraph 3. And so then I would read the paper first. So I'll read it out loud so you can just kind of understand how I would go about it. So, even then, my only friends were made of paper and ink. At school, I learned to read and write long before the other children. When my school friends saw notches of ink on incomprehensible pages, I saw lights, streets, and people. Words and the mystery of their hidden science fascinated me, and I saw in them a key with which I could unlock boundless word, a safe haven from that home, those streets, and those troubled days in which even I could sense that only a limited fortune await me. So for that first one, I noticed that this kid is different. He may not have a lot of friends, and he loves words. And he is poor. And so those are kind of like three sentiments I got from that first part. As you can see, like the limited fortune is part of the poor, and he didn't have friends because his only friends were made of paper and ink. So I would just start the second paragraph here. My father didn't like to see books in the house. There was something about them, apart from the letters he could not decipher, that offended him. He used to tell me as soon as I was 10 that he would send me off to work that I'd better get rid of all my scatterbrained ideas if I didn't want to end up a loser, a nobody. I used to hide my books under the mattress and wait for him to go out or fall asleep so that I could read. Once he caught me reading at night and flew into a rage, he tore the book from my hands and flung it out of the window. Okay, so now we know that his dad doesn't support because he doesn't understand. Because reading and being into words and addiction like that would make him poor or a loser. Okay. And we continue. If I catch you wasting electricity again, reading all this nonsense, you'll be sorry. My father was not a miser, and despite the hardships we suffered, whenever he could, he gave me a few coins so I could buy myself some treats, like the other children. He was convinced that I spent them on licorice sticks, sunflower seeds, or sweets, but I would keep them in a coffee tin under the bed, and when I'd collected 4 or 5 reals, I'd secretly rush out to buy myself a book. So obviously, we'd put a note here that he loves books. And his dad was a good guy, because he still gave him money for candy and stuff. He just didn't understand. He didn't understand the benefits of reading. My favorite place in the whole city was the Semper & Sons bookshops on Calle Santa Ana. It smelled of old paper and dust, and it was my sanctuary, my refugee. The bookseller would let me sit on a chair in the corner and read any book I liked to my heart's content. He hardly ever allowed me to pay for the books he placed in my hands, but when he wasn't looking, I'd leave the coins that I'd managed to collect on the counter before I left. It was only a small change. If I had to buy a book with that pittance, I would probably have been able to afford only a booklet of cigarette papers. When it was time for me to leave, I would do so by dragging my feet, a weight on my soul. If it had been up to me, I would have stayed in there forever. So, would stay in bookstore. And these notes don't have to be in depth. They can be really short. And then man would help by giving him books. One Christmas, Semper gave me the best gift I could have received. It was an old volume, read and experienced to the full. Great Expectations by Charles Dickens, I read on the cover. I was aware that Semper knew knew a few authors who frequently his establishment, and judging by the care with which he handed me the volume, I thought perhaps this Mr. Dickens was one of them. So you can kind of tell at this point, Paul, that this is kind of the main idea of the story, right? Because it really changes, and so I would highlight Great Expectations right here. A friend of yours, a lifelong friend, and from now on, he's your friend too. That afternoon, I took my new friend home, hidden under my clothes so that my father wouldn't see it. It was a rainy winter with days as gray as lead, and I read Great Expectations about 9 times, partly because I had no other book at hand, partly because I did not think there could be a better one in the whole world, and I was beginning to suspect that Mr. Dickens had written it just for me. Soon I was convinced that I didn't want to do anything else in life but to do what Mr. Dickens had done. So that's kind of the final part of that he wanted to do what Charles Dickens did. Okay, so now I'll pause this video and then we'll go to the questions.